In 1946, Betty and Frank Koller moved to Manitowish Waters to start a cranberry business. Betty worked along with Frank in the early days, clearing the land, planting the vines, and harvesting the cranberries until their business was up and running well. In the fall of 2015, the Frank B. Koller Memorial Library, which is named for Frank and Betty's son, hosted Betty for an interview by Library Director Janelle Kohl. Betty was well into her 90s at the time, but she was game to do this event, and 50-plus people attended. We present now to you that interview.
On behalf of the Manitowish Waters Historical Society, I'd like to thank everybody for coming in today. We have our very first public interview with one of probably our oldest generation here in Manitowish Waters, Betty Koller. And we all know Betty through history of coming into town to start a cranberry marsh, working in real estate, and you've been quite a philanthropist in town and done so many great things for our community. And you'll have a lot to say, although we can go on for days, I know. But we'll just try to keep it focused on the cranberry marsh and some of your own history. And maybe at a later date we can talk of some other things as well, which would be a lot of fun to do. And we are very honored to have you here today. Can everybody hear me okay? Yes. Okay, wonderful. To start out with, I'll just give a little overview of what we're going to do. I'm going to be asking Betty questions, a little bit of history about just yourself and growing up, and then we'll move into the cranberry marsh. Also, most of you should have received just a little visual of the marsh area on Little Trout Lake. And to the right of that is Wild Rice Lake. And that'll be the topic of the cranberry marsh, where the marshes were grown. And it's two different versions of it. So that'll be a little bit helpful as Betty does talk. And then I put up a little bit of a really old map from a 1908 plat book. I taped a little something on the wall. Just, that's what goes way back before the cranberry marsh. And we have a few cameras running. We're recording this. And it'll be played later on a DVD for our Manitowish Waters Historical Society meeting and social tonight at 6 o'clock here at the library. I then have a little bit, maybe 8 or 10 pictures on the CD and the digital recorder. We'll put them up against the wall, but I'll do that very last, and it's just a couple of fun pictures to look at of that Betty had of the marsh. And then that would be the conclusion, aside from questions, and of course treats over there at the table, a lot of cranberry stuff. So in your mind, put your questions together, and Betty and I will move along with an interview. Thank you. Okay, Betty. Well, today is Tuesday, September 29th, 2015. And what age does that bring you?
In October, I'll be 93.
Wow.
Nobody here can dispute me. I'm the oldest one here.
That's good.
And I was saying you were already 93. Sorry. Okay, Betty. Where were you born?
I was born in Birchwood, Wisconsin, over near Hayward and Stone Lake.
And where did you grow up?
Mainly in Chicago.
Who were your parents?
My mother was Anna Wise Leisure, and my father was Bert J. Leisure.
Where did you go to school?
Chicago, to Cornell Grade School, Bryn Mawr Grade School, and Hirsch High School. And I went to Teachers College for a couple years. And I got sick and had to quit.
Oh, you got sick and had to quit college. And Teachers College, that little did you know what you were headed for later in life. And as a teenager, did you take a job anywhere?
No? No. This is the longest one I held.
How did you meet your husband, Frank?
I went from fourth grade school through high school.
Fourth grade through high school.
We graduated from grade school in 1940, and then high school 1948, I guess. 36 was high school, and high school was in 1940.
And did you marry shortly after?
About 68 years.
Married for 68 years, and you got married right out of high school?
No, Frank went in the Navy, and we got married when he was in the Navy.
And he was in World War II?
What?
He went to World War II?
Yeah, he went to World War II. He was a radio operator on a ship.
Okay. So Frank was a World War II veteran. When Frank came back from World War II, how did your family decide to move to Manitowish Waters?
Well, we heard there was a development going up here, and my Aunt Jo Potter let us know that there was one available, one area, and so we came up here to see if we could do this. Frank was under the Veterans Bill of Rights and could not have his name on as an owner. Guy Potter was his instructor, and so it had to go under my father's name as Leisure Cranberry. And later on, when he was through, he could put his name on.
Interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. So first it was the leisure cranberry name on it. Mm-hmm. When you first came up to Manitowish Waters after all of the decisions were made to get into the cranberry business up here, do you recall your thoughts coming up this way into, really there wasn't much around in the early 40s, or I should say mid-40s. Do you recollect anything that was going through your mind?
No, I was used to being on cranberry marshes because of my uncle's marsh, so we knew what it was about, except Frank thought it was like him sitting in a chair in the house, not out there working. So I was used to knowing that there was what a cranberry marsh looked like. Not what we got.
So how did you get into the cranberry business? First, you went through your father, and his name had to be on the as the owner.
Yeah, because we're under the Veterans Bill. We weren't on the property.
Oh,
We came up here, and when we decided to come up, Frank worked on one of my uncle's marshes for a couple of weeks to get an idea of how to do some things.
so Frank learned a little bit that way. You may have known a little bit already from your uncle.
Yeah.
And when you first arrived here, where did you live?
Well, this was resort country, and there was very little you could rent. We did find a little place, like 2 rooms and a path, and we could have it for 1 year. So we lived over on Spider Lake, and the name was Hennigan that owned the house. We lived there for a year. Then when we had to move, we went down to the security bank and got a GI loan to buy a cottage. And I mean a cottage, no insulation. And every grower there had to do his own thing. Everyone had to supply their own housing, which wasn't very much.
So when you got yourself settled in, what were some of the important tasks to start right away when you got to town here? Well, maybe there wasn't a town, but when you got to your marsh.
Well, it's kind of complicated, as Dick knows. This land here was bought, or we had to buy the land from Aid Association for Lutherans through Vernon Goldsworthy in Eagle River. And we bought it from him, and they divided it into 40-acre parcels. And we bought one of the parcels. And Guy Potter, my uncle's brother, was financing John McFarland Sr. And he sent up some of his helpers and equipment to put in the big ditch that we went from Wild Rice Lake to Little Trout Lake. And he had one man that stayed with June and Mac all this time.
On the maps that we passed out, you probably see part of the marsh would be in Lac du Flambeau. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So we just copied out of the plat book, and on the top of the page there will be Little Trout Lake, and far to the right there's Wild Rice Lake. And there was a connection between Wild Rice and Little Trout, or the marshes. You had to dig some.
Well, we had to form a water corporation to pump water out of Little Wild Rice Lake into the big ditch into Little Trout. Right, Dick?
The ditch ran from the river a little ways away from off Little Trout to off Rice Lake to Little Trout Lake. It wasn't in directly to the lake, it was in the river.
Well, Little Trout was half owned by the Lac du Flambeau tribe.
Probably 3/4, yeah.
How much?
3/4 of the lake, yeah, it was in the reservation.
Yeah, there was a,
From
and the big ditch was on half on Flambeau and half on us, where we put our beds in.
The beds were all in Manitowish Waters.
On Lac du Flambeau? No,
None of the cranberry beds run in the reservation.
no.
Well, there was a little corner on the one map it shows, but they're just a tiny little corner that had connected to the marshes, actually. That was in the reservation, yeah.
Okay.
There is now, though, there are beds in the reservation.
To clarify, that little piece of property was annexed to Manitowish Waters
Yeah,
because they didn't want to go around with a school bus to pick up children that were in that corner. So that little piece you see on that
Yeah.
map was annexed to Manitowish Waters.
Okay. But, well, thank you. Thank you.
Said it was complicated.
Yeah, it does look complicated. When you arrived, again, after some time you were here, there had to be a lot of manual labor necessary to make everything up to par so you can get your cranberries in and build the infrastructure. Can you recall some of those times at first
Whether what?
to build infrastructure so you could work on the marshes easier and clearing any land and the work that had to be done with that?
Well, we worked everybody worked their own marsh. I don't really know what the other marshes did, I only know what our marsh did. Most of the growers would have equipment that maybe one of the others could use and they would lend it to them. We were the least of the bunch because we had the least money. But I remember her blowing the stuff.
When you were working in the marshes after planting the berries and then they've grown, there's some equipment over here, right over there. And would you like to tell us about that? The piece of equipment there?
Oh. Well, that's a cranberry hand rake. And when we first started, we had no physical big equipment, and we used these hand rakes. That's tube labor, which nobody will do today.
Does anybody in the front row have an idea of how that might work? Oh, okay.
Scoop it.
Scoop it. Oh, yeah, you know how to do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've worked it many times.
Oh, you did. And then the flowers are sitting on a box there, a crate. Would you like to explain any stories about the crate?
Oh, those were drying crates. That was the only way we knew how to dry our berries. And Frank and I, the first year in our little cottage, we built 10,000 of them by hand.
Oh,
And we put them out in the yard to get them out of the house. But when the snow went, so did the stacks of drying crates we had. And the drying crates at night was what we dried them on the cranberry marshes, on the dikes, and we had them as, so the open part, the wind could go through and dry the berries. If it got too cold at night, you had to go out there and turn them so that the lath part would be on the side to protect them. And you might put some tarred felt down there. And then you got all your friends and neighbors to come out and do that and help you.
Did you go out at night and or during the day and pick the berries and do that sort of thing?
I worked on the marsh. The other women, I don't know what they did. Like I say, I don't know what other marshes do. But I had to be in the poorest marsh of the bunch. We didn't really have much background other than my dad helping out, who was still working in Chicago. And so I had to work on the beds, whatever is needed. It wasn't easy, but I was a lot younger. and later on, everybody had their own warehouses and sorting plants and that, and everybody worked in. The first, we didn't have bushes for the marshes, for the vines. You took established vines from another marsh, and Frank had ensilage cutter that he cut them into 3-inch pieces, and he made some stompers, which would be metal. One would go this way and the other would go this way. And then he'd put one down and then the other one to get the ones that were missing. And that's how we planted ours. I don't know what other marshes did. I was too busy with ours. But
Do you recall?
But if it got cold at night after you planted, because we had to use flood it. A lot of the vines washed away, so it didn't take a good catch. But many of them stayed.
Do you recall at first how many cranberry plants you and Frank did plant the first year?
Did we put about 300 acres, not 300 acres, but 300 pounds to an acre? No, what do you?
Well, now they plant about maybe 2,000 sometime, depends on,
Yeah.
now a lot of them are growing plants and planting individual ones, but could up from 1,000 to 2,000 pounds per acre of vines, yeah.
Well, we hauled them from Wisconsin Rapids, established marshes that pruned their vines, and we had brought them up from Wisconsin Rapids, Hayward, and I did most of the hauling. We had one truck, which was on the road a lot, but and that's when we got the vines up to the marsh. We had to use that ensilage cutter to put them in these 3-inch parcels and then plant them. That's about right. That's about all on that.
Now, I remember you telling me about roads. The lack of roads.
Oh, yeah. Well, we didn't. We came in off the Powell Road and we stopped at I think it might be Bartling's Alderwood Lodge now, but it was a girls' camp, and we all parked in there and walked in, carrying whatever you had to do with a wheelbarrow or a stone boat. And you didn't forget anything the second day, because it was a long way in for some of us. Like the Bartlings and their inner mills didn't have quite as far as we had to go. But we all had to come on that side of the river because there was no bridge across the Trout River. And that's how we got in, was by the Powell Road. And walked in till we could get some equipment and put some roads in.
How about talking to the outside world?
What?
To the outside world about you. How did you communicate?
Well, we went in as far as we could on the Powell Road. And then later on, we enlarged it so that we could go right up to our own marshes. Otherwise, we'd still be walking.
How about a telephone?
No. Electric, no. We put the electric and the telephone pole in with the help or with their help and our help. They hung wires for the electric and also for the telephone. The telephone was owned by an individual, Roble, and we had to help on both those to get the electric and the telephone in.
Do you recall any stories related to that, to bringing that in? Or was it a real hardship?
Those that were to come on, hang on to these wires that we put in along the town line road, were supposed to sort of give us some money back on it, which never happened. But, did you ever get money back? Never.
Just check.
But that's about it, and that's what we got in. At that time, we couldn't come in off Highway 51 till we got a bridge over the Trout River. And that was with the growers and some instructor, and put this bridge in. Later on, they put a culvert in so we could go over there easier. But we couldn't get into to go down the regular road. I think Herb had a truck and the road coming in was so rough a fender fell off.
Did you happen to use any horses to try to plant anything?
No,
From some of the reading, it sounded like maybe some other parts of the state did, but up here?
no. Not that I know of.
Okay. Well, shortly after your arrival here, your son Frankie was born. What kind of medical facilities were around?
Tomahawk was the closest hospital. He was a Dr. Kate Newcomb's baby. And I had prenatal care, his birth, and a year's care after for $50.
Oh my goodness.
That's, and when I had to work on the marsh in the summer, my folks would take Frankie to Chicago because I couldn't work on the marsh and watch him either. But we made it.
Now, what do you recall as some of the major projects you would do on the marsh?
Pardon?
What would you recall as the major projects you would do on the marsh?
Well, I drove tractors. I sprayed. Frank and I laid out the beds with a transit, which didn't really do too good. They were out of line a lot, but that's all we had. Whatever there was on the marsh, I had to do it, as we only had one Indian to work for us, Emery Fine. And I think we've got a picture of him digging a ditch.
Yes, and the video.
But whatever it was needed to do, I had to help do it. Like I say, I don't know what the rest of the marshes did.
And how did the weather affect you at various times of your cranberry growing?
Well, we had to flood our marshes with lift pumps and gravity. And at night, we had to go out on the beds and check a thermometer that was down on the bed. We went across on planks, because I did this till midnight if it was going to get cold, and Frank then took over after midnight. But then you had to get on your hands and knees to read the thermometer, because it was one of those little green, it's called green thermometers. And you did. And I know one time, before we had any warehouse, Frank and Herb Intermill sat in the truck waiting for the weather, and they decided it was okay. They went home, and it's early in the morning, around dawn, it got cold. We all lost some cranberries then. But that's how we checked on the weather. And I know some marshes were colder than others. I think Intermills was a little colder than ours. But everybody did what they had to do.
In the late 50s, there was a weed killer used on cranberries, aminotrazolol. I may be pronouncing that incorrectly.
Aminotrazole.
There we go.
It was a chemical. It's a weed controller you put what could do with water. And this Arthur Fleming, who was in the Department of Agriculture, declared that they cause cancer. This was right before Thanksgiving. In fact, this here explains it, that all the grocers took their cranberries off the shelves, and wherever they had any. Mel Laird was one that basically helped us out, plus Nixon, and my dad was on that committee, and they were going to meet with Proxmire, who went out the back door and never did meet with him. So they did what they could, but it took years before they indemnified us. We had a warehouse full of berries that froze and thawed, and we could do nothing with them. We had to dump them when they told us we could dump them. And they proved that there was no reason to do that they weren't harming anything. In fact, what we had in the warehouse, the celery growers and potato growers picked up, they could use it, but cranberries couldn't. They did indemnify us a little bit, didn't cover what we lost, but they did get some money.
In the 1950s, more machines came out. Different kinds of machines came out, so you wouldn't have to use so many of the back-breaking cranberry rakes. And did Frank have a favorite machine that he got right away, or was there something he was really, really excited about?
Well, cranberries were a specialty. You could buy a tractor, but anything in the cranberry business had to be made either by your grower, or there were places in the Wisconsin Rapids and that area that did build things for growers. And you could buy it from them. But a lot of it was built right in your shops. He did have later on he did have what we called a bridge that 2 trucks spanned one dike against the other with a sliding thing that you could sit on and spray weeds, pull weeds, just do anything off of that. It was 130 foot long. He built one for our marsh and one for the Fifield Marsh. They're now non-existent.
Frank was quite politically active in the cranberry business, such as he tried to purchase land in Lac du Flambeau. And would you like to tell about that?
Well, where the Trout River was, across the river was a parcel of land. And the way the section line went through, it went through part of ours and over toward where Fred Kopp's little cottages were. And if we didn't get that change into Manitowish Waters and that there's into Boulder Junction, Flambeau would have to send a school bus and put some roads in and different things for us. So we wanted to be in Manitowish Waters, and they wanted to do that also because they didn't want to have to send school buses over our way. It'd be a long time. Then we rented a parcel from a single woman, or a woman over in Flambeau. Her name was Rosie Sky Smith, and we rented a parcel that came onto our land. And well, we worked on that to buy it, and we had an Indian from the Indian Reservation do some timber cruising to tell us what would be a fair price to buy that parcel. Well, we went up to Ashland to the Bureau and got their approval, and they told us what it was worth, which we offered. We went down to Monaco one time, and the lady that was Dorothy Stewart, who was head of the Indian land here in Flambeau, and she said, "I have bad news for you, Betty. Larry, O'Leary, John O'Leary, and the 2 Burkos boys, they were in the car business, auto business, and O'Leary had a hardware store, and he didn't want them to pay for repairs or anything, and he took quick claim deeds on land. Well, until we got that cleared up, we couldn't buy them. And Frank went up to Larry, I'm surprised he's still living. Frank was so mad at him that he went up there and told him, he says, we were supposedly buying that property that you got quick claim deeds on. He says, oh yeah, we'll sell it to you after we clear the trees. And Frank says, how are you going to clear the trees? And they said, well, we'll just get across and take them out. Frank says, no, we have a water corporation, which I was president. He wasn't, but they didn't know that. And we're not going to let you go onto our property to get those trees up. So we did buy it. And we paid more for it than what the Bureau of Indian Affairs would have given us. And it was also tied in with a big place over on Plummer Lake that went with it. And she was just sick at what she had to take for both those parcels, because it was a lot less than what we were giving her. But then we got the property. And that's where our warehouse was built on, and it's across the river. The Water Corporation has land over there. And some of the others, McFarland is over in there, and Winter and Kovar over on that property. Now it has a beautiful tree with an eagle's nest on it. That's about all.
I saw you take that big sigh. I had just an interesting question about your father. I was reading through some of the newspaper clippings, and one of them said in August of 1961, Wisconsin Cranberry Growers Association meeting was held here. And it sounds like your father, Bert Leisure, Vice President of Ocean Spray, was very good at convincing the medical community of the importance of drinking cranberry juice every day.
Well, they went into medical conventions and demonstrated on cranberry juice mainly. And I know my mother helped out on that, and so did my sister. And we just more or less tried to push cranberries for the fact of them being good for your health. There is something here on bladder control, urinary tract infections, and there's an article here that shows what they feel was right for the cranberry business. There's what I think Chuck Lewis over around Stone Lake, his brother-in-law was a doctor, and he was helping us push that fact.
Well, it still holds to this day, I believe, that cranberries are good for your bladder. I also see, okay, those are pretty much my questions, but I also see here some notes that I know you and Carol were working on.
Yeah.
Would you like to read them? I think you. Pardon me?
I can just wing it, I think.
Oh. I know you both had been working on them, and I don't want to take away the hard work that you both had done. and read your notes or glance over them and just give your thoughts about. I see that this about the land and everything, the very beginnings. Would you like to cover that?
Well, the land, like I said, was owned by the Aid Association for Lutherans, and Vern Goldsworthy bought it, and he sold it to the growers. They were in 40-acre parcels, and you bought what you wanted. We had 40 acres we bought, and from each, Guy Potter was a stepfather of John McFarland, and he financed him financially, and he sent a man from his marsh up here to help him out with his equipment. And they dug the big ditch, and from every ditch took off of that big ditch. We put into our flooding and drainage ditches, and every other one did. McFarland was first. We were second. Bartling was third. Then I went over to Intermills and Folsom. And everybody did the same thing. They had to bring their own things in. We had lift pumps, which I imagine the rest had too, and it raised the water to go into our flooding ditches and draining ditches. And then off of the flooding ditches and that, each marsh had its own ditches off of that, and that was controlled with slide boards. They're for bulkheads, which we had to build our own out of wood. Today they have culverts, but we had to build the bulkheads, and they were controlled to control the water by slide boards in these bulkheads. You raised them to let water in and close them down and then pumped into the regular ditches. I don't know if I see my hand going, doesn't mean a thing. But that's how we got it. We started with just 3 beds. And of those beds, everybody had their own side ditches around these 3-acre beds. If everybody had 3 acres, I'm not sure what the others did. But we had these beds, and we dug the little ditches around each bed and down the center by hand. We had an Indian that, we have a picture showing that did hand ditching, but that's how you had to do it. We didn't have any equipment. And Frank mowed the dikes, the weeds, with a scythe. He could do 1, maybe 2 beds a day. Now these are long beds because they're 3 acres each, and that's hard work. But that's how we did it. And later on, we must have gotten a mortgage to continue with our business, to get some equipment and to put up a warehouse, a cinder block warehouse. We just put the main part on, years later, we put a second story on. I don't recall how much we got from the bank, but we always used the Wood County Bank in Wisconsin Rapids, as they were good cranberry growers, and still are. Moving on to on the beds when they started producing or growing, we sprayed with a sprayer, which I used. I either drove the tractor or I was out spraying. And believe me, it was hard work. We used either kerosene for spraying or what was that other, do you know?
Stoddard solvent.
Huh?
Stoddard solvent.
Solder solvent, which they use for cleaning clothes and that. And that's what we used to spray. Well, it was hard on your skin. And it didn't always just go on the weeds, it went on to us too. But that was one of the jobs I had. Then we had one that we had off our, Frank was good with welding, and then he built this bridge that spanned 2 dikes. And you could sit on it and spray from there, or pull weeds, or whatever's needed. We put up a house out on the marsh over our pumps. We had 2 diesel pumps. They were lift pumps. And we put this building up over these pumps. And then we put our house above that. It was an army barracks. Very little insulation and that, but that's what we lived in for some years. We had bought a cottage after we had to move, but it was too far from the marsh, so we built this house over the pumps, and we lived out there in the winter, and Frankie went to school. He never missed a day, but the bus wouldn't come in. You had to take him down to the main road. But it was, people would say, "Isn't it noisy?" I says, "You get used to it." And if a stick went through or something, it changed the rhythm of the pump, and you'd wake up, but it was right on the beds, right next to the beds, which he wanted to be near there. But there's many things that I did out there. When we had this cottage, we built these drying crates. We had 10,000 of them that we built. And like I said, that was our only drying way to dry the berries. And that was hard work, getting them so they could be harvested without losing them at night. When you had to turn all those boxes around. I know we had friends come out, Frank Koller, Joe Hills. Even our gas man came down, Herman Yeager, to turn the boxes around. Now this is at night when you had no lights out there. And our pump house there didn't have any lights. We didn't have any water. drinking water we brought in from up in the village. Ehlert's Market, Anita and Art Ehlert would take our cranberry messages for weather, and each of the growers would go get the weather. And because there were no telephones out our way. Now whether others had phones, I don't know. But we'd have to go up and get the messages from the store and use that for our weather reports. And that was, the weather reports were not free. Every grower had to put money in to have this, I don't know if it's University of Wisconsin or what, but they put money in to have this weather forecast. They'd have like weather reports for the cranberry growers. And you depended on that. I don't know what else there is around. John McFarland really was the first one up here in 1945 because Guy Potter loaned his equipment and his men to come put the big ditch in, and or we couldn't have done anything to speak of. And he financed him. And everybody else had their own financing. And my father was one that had to help us out. Plus the Wood County Bank. And I think that's on this Veterans Bill Frank took from the bank. It was a Security State Bank in Minocqua. The Woodruff Bank refused us a loan because I think there was a certain percent they could charge you for a VA bill. And we used them for our financing there for a while, for our VA loan at least. It was just a cottage. Had a sink hanging on the wall. It froze underneath. Even the outlets froze. It was just a cottage with vertical logs and tarred felt and oakum put in between. And that two logs matched. And that's where we built our drying crates. Then we moved out to the marsh and we rented the cottage up by the week during the summer. When we were at rented that first little cottage, we had electric and water, but we had no washing machine. I washed all the blue jeans and sheets by hand and hung them in the living room. Looked like a Chinese laundry in there. But when we got out to the marsh, our pump house, we call it. We had a washing machine with a gas pump or something on it that we could use and hang outside. No dryers, of course. Well, we went on from there, and everybody survived, and we put in as many beds as we could with what money we had, which wasn't too many, but before we sold out the first time, we had 11 beds. At the time these vines were put in, they were called cereals. Very few other vines were available, other than we had one at the end that was round like these, and they were called Bain McFarland's. That's McFarlane, and they produced good, but they never colored up. Hard to get color on them, and if we didn't have color, we were docked for that. Today, with the new varieties, they color up easier and better producers. The first crop we had was 300 barrels, and we stored them in over on Island Lake where Bruce Potter was, in that big warehouse they had down there. Betty, what's her name, had that place that we stored our berries in. But I don't know whether it's much hard. The land was forestry when we started, and we could not build out there on the marsh till it got changed into agriculture. And some of the marshes wanted to build, and they couldn't because it was not accessible. We had to get that changed into agriculture. We weren't too interested because we had nothing to build with. But I know several of the marshes wanted to put houses out there for their workers, and they couldn't do it unless we got it changed into agriculture. We went through a few hoops years ago. Most of the growers still have their own marshes. A few of us are selling off. We sold our main marsh twice, different ones, because we built on further. But we sold our marsh and just had a small one. But we had two others that we bought and built up and then sold. But there's only one or two left. Folsoms are still there.
Bartlings and Folsoms.
Bartlings,
The
Folsoms.
original, yeah.
Interville sold theirs. We sold ours. And McFarland sold theirs. So there's only 2 original Marshes. Now, Dick is a second generation. Tom Folsom's a second generation. Myrtle Bartling, no, Myrtle's gone.
Mike-
But Lenore Bartling
Michael is
is
the
still.
third. I said Michael's the third, and now Stephen and David are the fourth
I
on the
know it.
marsh. Yeah.
They're all second, third.
Yeah.
Just very few second generation, and I'm only the first one. I thought nobody'd dispute me, but they did. But I don't know much more than what I told you, even though I've probably got notes that I didn't do anything with. But we all managed to survive. There are some pictures here. Are they up on the wall?
I will put them up on the wall next. I'll give your voice a little bit of a break.
Okay. We'll have a drink.
Yeah. Unfortunately, only the white stuff here.
That's okay.
I will get the little movies here up on. We're going to use the wall here. That seems to work just as fine as the screen, and so that was much easier. And show a few pictures of the original group that started the Cranberries.
That's our house.
And then your house, and we'll let you know what comes up on the wall here shortly.
This is some of the growers, Dick.
Oh,
Yeah, we have pictures of the growers.
is that the one with the group in, yeah, our home, my folks' home? I had I got a bigger picture of that, and I looked for it before I left, but I couldn't
Yeah,
find
well,
it.
the Goldie's on there,
Yeah,
and
they're all on
I
there.
don't know if it's in somebody's house, it must be.
Yeah, that was my folks.
I had another one too, but I don't know where that one went to. I gave one to Mike and.
No, the other way.
I'll add just a little
You can tell
tree,
which heads have to be
marsh
scooped.
stuff here. Palmer Hanson did the original surveying of the section lines before anything was done out there.
Perfect, that works.
And I think John Iverson, I think was the correct name. He's a historical figure in town for your society. He was Palmer's helper. And I was in high school at the time, and I helped cut the lines and carry some of the equipment for him when the original surveys were done out there.
See, I don't know that part. I know what the growers were, who all these
Yeah,
people were.
that's them.
Yeah, here's the
There were others
growers
that
right
came
up
in
there.
later, such as Weber and that.
Yep, these are all the growers.
Yeah, that's Goldie there.
My dad
That's my
used-
dad, the next one.
Microphone, Janelle.
Can't see him. Is that Harold Rose?
Down in front is Harold, yes. And Howard Folsom.
Can you point them out? I can't see them.
There's Harold Gross and Howard Folsom, Vernon Goldsworthy, Betty's father, that's my father, Delbert Barling. That is, I think Ab Alexander, he worked for Weber. And that was Weber and Mac McFarland, Frankie, and that's Guy Potter.
And then thank you.
And Guy Potter was down in there too.
And in the display case, there's another picture of this with all the names underneath that Barbara Bartling had brought in. And the display case is right in the foyer there. So there'll be another picture of that too. Okay, there'll be another. There's about 5 or 6 of them. And here's the same, several of the same
Yeah,
group.
that's from
Yeah.
Delbert Mac's
Yeah,
house. That's
these are
Mac
the
and
actual growers here,
Howard,
yeah.
Frank. There were a couple other growers in there by that time. Harold Gross and Clarence Weber. I don't know who that is on the end. But there was a parcel of land that was never developed for years. It was called the Dolman Marsh. And he was one that bought a piece of land, but I don't think he ever saw it even. And I think it was sold to Don Rell and Howard Folsom. This is what the land looked like that we bought.
Who's in the picture?
Pardon?
Who's
Yeah.
in the picture?
That's Frank and Frankie, I think.
Very good. And how about the little dog?
The dog.
That was Rusty.
Rusty.
Salty, our dog, and that was Frank. But that's what the land looked like we bought. And this is our Indian pot vine. And he's digging a ditch by hand, which is the way we had to do it. Now that was hard work. And they'd throw the dirt up onto what we call dikes, which would divide the beds. And that's what we'd go down each dike to get to the other end. That's where our pump house was, that's where we lived. On top. And underneath was the lift pumps run by diesel motors. That was Frank and myself. That was our house. And down here was the pumps. I think there's a picture with.
That'll be next.
That was Paul Cuno and Frank by the pumps. That's Frank in the pump house there. That's after many years where all those marshes were developed.
Is that one of the crates you built?
Is that one of the crates that you built, Betty?
No,
No. Okay.
that's not.
They must be picking cranberries there and.
What would that be, Dick?
The box that the man is dumping was called a picking box, and at first, when they were the very first hand raking, they would rake the berries and fill a box of berries, and then carry it over to the dike and dump it into a drying crate. And quite often it had the box full, they would put it into 2 crates so that there weren't too many berries in it, so they could air dry out on the dike faster. And then after they got dry, they would dump the crates together so you had a full one, and then they were hauled in off the marsh. And even when they got the first picking machines, the berries were still picked up by the picker and then dumped up into those picking boxes, and they were still carried off the bed by hand and dumped into drying crates from the very first pickers. And then things evolved to where they started moving them entirely differently, but
Are those vines?
that's,
Are those vines? Vines that
well, there would be some vines, they're separated.
This is our warehouse. We built the bottom part first. And then later on, we put the second story on after we had the berries we had to sort. This you could work on it. Right there you can see was a loading dock where the trucks, semis could come in, back in, and we could bring our berries in either in sugar bags or cartons. When they went to the canners, they went in 50-pound sugar bags. And if they were going to fresh fruit, they'd been in 25-pound boxes, individual boxes.
Yeah, Frank.
That's Frank, I don't. The others there right now.
21 down the 14. Yeah.
That's Cranberry Men meet in the county and
microphone.
Orange Golly.
they're talking things over during the summer parlay of the Wisconsin Cranberry Growers Association during a meeting at Manitowish Waters last weekend. From left to right, from left to right, Philly Nash, Glico Nash, president of the Wisconsin Cranberry Growers Association, Orrin Colley, grower from Massachusetts, and president of National Cranberry Institute, Frank Koller, host and partner in Leisure Koller Cranberry Company. In the town of Manitowish Waters, Floyd Headland, Washington, D.C., Director of the Fruits and Vegetables Division of the United States Department of Agriculture, and Vernon Goldsworthy of Cranberry Products in Eagle River. So those are the 5 gentlemen. Okay, that was
That's one of the side ditches, I think, with the bulkheads. You don't know, is it thick?
I'm not sure what that is.
I'm not either.
No, I don't know.
It came off of this from your photo book. There's just a couple more.
Well, I'm not sure exactly what we're pointing at.
Okay.
There's Frank's bridge. It had 2 trucks that would span 2 beds. And we could sit on it and pull weeds, spray. And another thing, they were cut down trucks. That one driver on each truck. And this is one of our pipes that went into the beds for flooding. Frank built 2 of those, one for the 5-field marsh and one for our marsh.
So I think there's just the one more.
That's probably that ditch going out.
Yeah, just a drainage ditch.
Yeah. It goes out to all of the marshes. Everybody was to pay for that ditch. And the ones that came on later never paid, like Harold Gross.
Oh, there was one more left. Do you remember what this one is, Betty?
No, I don't.
Oh, okay.
I don't know what that is.
Well, to get sand to spread on the beds, you dig it out of the ground, and because the groundwater is so close, it's wet. You stack it up for a year to dry out, then you can spread it the following year. And done in the winter on ice.
I think that was the, oh, one more.
Those are flooded beds.
Well, just sections that are flooded there.
Oh, that was our short little slideshow, and these pictures came from some materials from Betty that we have up here, in case anybody would like to look a little closer. And like I said, some of the pictures are in the foyer there, right in the display case as well. And Betty, are you open to some questions? Are you doing okay?
I'm doing okay.
You look good. You look good.
Frank would say he's still above ground.
Well, I'd like to open to some questions. We have Jody coming around with a little bit of a microphone. We had a couple microphones here, so.
I just wondered if Betty remembers what year they put the bridge across the creek there.
The bridge in,
Yeah,
I don't remember what year we put the bridge in. We put a bridge in, then we put a culvert in, and now they put another culvert in. Well, it had to be in the 50s.
Probably by 1950, I think.
Has to be in the
I-
50s.
okay.
Because I know Jerry Mulholland was going to go to school, and he had to wait for the school bus. And I think he stood out there so long that he got pneumonia.
Any other?
I can just say, Mrs. Koller, thank you for all your hard work and giving back to our community with all that hard work. There's so many things in this town that we can all appreciate, including this building that we're in. Thank you.
Thank you for coming. These are just things not in order.
Microphone.
None of this is in order. We had it on paper. That didn't mean a thing.
That's wonderful. I'd rather she just.
That's as I remember it. And there's a lot more I can't really remember what everything is. I can remember it, but some of it I can't say.
Smart lady.
And I would also like to point out, too, that we had interviewed John McFarland in February. And John, you were 7, I think, when you had... So there's a little bit different view of a youngster coming up and working on the marshes when everything just started. And it's a lot of fun to read as well. There are different topics that you talked about that Betty hadn't, and of course having a youngster's view versus an adult. So that's here available for anybody that is wanting to check it out and read it. I know a lot of people have made good comments, and hopefully we can continue on our interviews with other cranberry growers, which would be have to be the second generations at this point. But
Janelle, is that on the blog yet? John's interview?
I don't. Okay, you put it on there, Sarah? Okay, I guess it is. I guess it is on the blog. Some more questions.
An answer, I think that the bridge was put in 47 or 48.
It was after thinking about it. I know it was before 50.
Yeah.
I graduated in high school in 48, and
the wooden bridge,
Yeah, the wooden
Didn't
bridge
last
you're
very
talking about, yeah.
but I think it was 47 or late 47.
It might, yeah. It was, yeah, I think that's closer than, yeah. It's,
How many cranberry growers do we have now? If they can stand, still.
How many cranberry growers do we have right now in the room if they could stand? Was the question. Yep.
I'm retired, I mean, we sold our property, I'm out of work.
And Bartling, yes, yes.
They're about a fourth generation.
Barbara's over there, she's standing anyway.
Barbara's over there, yep.
It's groceries.
Well, thank you for coming. I don't know what else I can say that's presentable.
Oh, tell us about it.
Thank you so much, Betty.